The package was addressed to her 100 years ago. For 10 years, Eleanor Vance had managed to shut the entire world out. After her husband passed, she turned the final lock on a door that was already closing, leaving herself as the only soul in a sprawling manor that groaned under the weight of dust and memory. Deliveries stopped, phone calls went unanswered, and the seasons turned outside her windows without anyone to see them. The silence was her fortress, but fortresses are meant to be broken. It started with a knock. The sound was so alien after a decade of quiet that Eleanor thought she'd imagined it. Then it came again, a firm, insistent rap that rattled the heavy oak door. With a hesitation that felt like rust on old hinges, she crept through the grand, shrouded foyer. When she opened the door, there was no one there, just a small, tidy package on the stone steps. It was wrapped in plain brown paper and tied with simple string. There was no return address. Eleanor carried it inside, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She set it on a table, sending motes of dust dancing in the one shaft of light that pierced the gloom. Her address was written in a precise, elegant script she didn't recognize. But it was the postmark that made the breath catch in her throat. It was faded, but you could still make it out. A circular stamp bearing the year, 1926. Eleanor had spent a decade shutting out the world, and the world had finally come knocking. Only this package, it seemed, wasn't from her time at all. Section 1. The Opening. The house was unnervingly still as Eleanor just stared at the impossible object on her table. An hour passed. Logically, she knew it had to be a prank, some kind of elaborate gimmick. But the cold dread coiling in her stomach told her otherwise. This house, her family's for generations, held its secrets close. It was a place where the past felt less like history and more like a sleeping guest in the next room. With trembling fingers, she finally untied the string. The paper was so brittle it threatened to crumble. The smell that wafted out was one of profound age, of cedar, dried lavender, and something else. A cloying metallic scent of decay. Inside, nestled in yellowed cotton, were 3 things. The first was a hand mirror, its silver back tarnished by a century of neglect. The second was a locket, heavy and cold on a delicate chain. And the third was a slip of parchment, folded into a tiny square. She picked it up, her touch almost reverent, and unfolded it. A single word was written in faint, spidery ink. Elias. The name meant nothing to her, and yet it sparked something, a splinter of a memory she couldn't quite grasp. It felt like a word from a fever dream, a name spoken in a hushed, sorrowful whisper. And then she remembered. Her mother, in the last, delirious days of her illness, had whispered that very name. Her eyes wide with a terror Eleanor had been too young to understand. She'd buried the memory, writing it off as the ramblings of a dying mind. But now, here it was, resurrected from the past and lying in her hand. Section 2. The Reflection. Eleanor found herself drawn to the mirror. Its surface was a milky, clouded glass that gave back a distorted version of her own pale face. She felt a strange urge to clean it, to see what was hiding beneath the fog of time. Using the sleeve of her cardigan, she began to polish the glass. For one breathtaking second, the face that stared back at her was not her own. It was a woman, her hair styled in the fashion of the 1920s, her eyes wide with unspeakable terror. Her mouth was open in a silent scream. And then, just as quickly as it appeared, the image vanished, replaced by Eleanor's own shocked face. She dropped the mirror onto the table with a clatter, her hand flying to her mouth. It was a trick of the light. It had to be. The dust, the strange angle, her own mind frayed from years of isolation. She repeated this to herself, over and over. a hollow chant in the suffocating silence. She decided she would put the items back in the box and hide them away. But she couldn't. The mirror held a morbid fascination. She placed it on the mantelpiece, where it seemed to watch her, a silent, silver eye in the gloom. Sleep didn't come easy that night. She was tormented by dreams of whispering voices and hallways that shifted and changed around her. She woke just before dawn to a house that felt colder than usual. Her eyes were immediately drawn to the mantelpiece. In the faint gray light, she saw another face in the mirror. This time, it was a man, his features sharp and cruel, his lips twisted into a sneer. The vision lasted only a moment, but it left a feeling of pure malice that lingered in the air. The house no longer felt like a sanctuary. It felt like a cage, and she was starting to think she wasn't the only one trapped inside. What if the ghosts of your family weren't just stories? What if the secrets they kept are still waiting in the dark, waiting for you? If you're drawn to unraveling these kinds of dark mysteries, consider liking this video and subscribing for more tales that explore what waits just beyond the veil. Section 3. The Locket and the Lie. The visions in the mirror pushed Eleanor past fear and straight into a desperate hunt for answers. This wasn't just her imagination anymore. The truth, she knew, was somewhere in this house, and that package was the key. She turned her attention to the locket. It was heavier than it looked. Its silver filigree worn smooth by time, the initials on its surface too faded to read. Her stiff, clumsy fingers struggled with the clasp. When it finally sprang open, she held her breath. It wasn't empty. Tucked inside was a miniature photograph, its subjects faded into sepia ghosts. It showed two young women, their faces so similar, they had to be twins. Eleanor recognized one of them with a jolt. It was her grandmother, Genevieve, a younger, brighter version of the stern woman from the portraits upstairs. The other woman was a complete stranger, yet she was an identical reflection, a shadow self. Who was she? In all the family stories and photo albums, there had never, ever been a mention of Genevieve having a sister, let alone a twin. This was the first thread of a lie that had been carefully woven for decades. Driven by a new, urgent purpose, Eleanor climbed to the attic, a place she hadn't set foot in for years. The air was thick with the smell of cedar and forgotten time. She started tearing through old trunks, prying open chests that hadn't seen daylight in half a century. And there, in a leather-bound hatbox tucked beneath her grandmother's wedding veil, she found it, a diary. The entries from 1926 were a stark contrast to the rest of the journal. The once neat handwriting devolved into a frantic, slanted scrawl. Genevieve wrote of a forbidden affair, of a shame that threatened to ruin her family's name, and of a terrible secret she was being forced to keep. She wrote of her shadow, her other half, a part of her that had to be erased. Then Eleanor found a small bundle of letters, tied with a faded ribbon. One from the local physician was dated November 1926. In it, he offered his deepest condolences on the tragic and unfortunate stillbirth of her second daughter, a stillbirth. But the diary told a different story. Genevieve hadn't given birth to one child, but two. And the second baby, a girl she had secretly named Eliana, nicknamed Elias, was not stillborn. An entry written just a week after the letter's date described a healthy, crying infant who was taken away in the dead of night. It was a cover-up. Not a stillbirth, but an infanticide, a sacrifice to protect the family from scandal. And Elias was the name of the victim. Section 4. The climax, the loop. As Eleanor read those final damning words, a deep cold seeped into the attic, a chill that had nothing to do with the autumn air. It felt as if the house itself was exhaling a century of grief and rage. The single bare bulb hanging from the rafters flickered violently and then died, plunging her into total darkness. Panic seized her. Fumbling for her flashlight, she cast its weak, trembling beam across the attic. That's when she saw it. Downstairs, a strange, sickly silver light began to pulse from the living room. It was the mirror. She crept down the attic stairs, each creak of the floorboards sounding like a gunshot. Reaching the living room, she cut through the gloom with her flashlight beam. The mirror on the mantelpiece was glowing, its surface swirling like smoke. As she got closer, an image began to form in the glass. It wasn't a stranger this time. It was her. Her own reflection stared back, but horrifyingly distorted. This Eleanor was gaunt, her hair streaked with gray, her eyes wide with a permanent screaming despair. Her reflection's mouth opened, and though no sound came out, Eleanor understood the word it formed: Elias. Then the image shifted. It now showed her own back, standing exactly where she was, looking into the mirror. But she wasn't alone. Behind her reflection, a figure was taking shape in the shadows. A tall, thin silhouette of a woman radiating pure malevolence. The ghost of the forgotten twin. In that instant, a devastating, impossible truth crashed down on her. The package wasn't from the past. It was a warning from her future. She was trapped in a time loop, a cycle of horror cursed to relive the discovery of her family's sin over and over again. This wasn't the first time she'd gotten the package. She'd received it before, and she would receive it again. The items were a desperate message from her future, tormented self. The mirror to show her the truth, the locket to identify the victim, and the name to unlock the sin. Conclusion. The spectral figure in the mirror raised a hand, reaching for her. Eleanor spun around with a choked cry, her flashlight beam slashing through empty air. Nothing. The room was cold and still. She slowly turned back to the mirror. Now, only her own terrified face stared back. The glow was gone. The house was silent once more, but the silence had changed. It was no longer the quiet of solitude. It was the watchful, waiting silence of a prison. She finally understood. The curse wasn't just the ghost of a murdered child. The curse was the unending discovery of the truth. Her punishment for a crime she didn't commit was to witness it for eternity. Her gaze fell to the brown paper and string still lying on the table. A chilling, sickening feeling took root in her mind, a sense of dreadful inevitability. With a certainty that froze her to the bone, she knew what she had to do next. She had to prepare the package, address it to herself. And 100 years from now, or maybe just a day from now, she would have to send it, starting the cycle all over again. Unless she could find the courage her previous selves had lacked. The courage to either destroy the artifacts and face the spirit's wrath, or to finally let it consume her, breaking the loop at the cost of her own soul. The choice was hers, and the house waited patiently for her decision.